December, and that was not necessarily disapproving or approving of a said map, but it was basically a listening session where the committee got to hear what the community's concerns were, what we liked, what we did like, what we think was wrong, what can be improved. Now in the new year, they have they have devised some maps, and there have been several meetings prior to this one, but I said that Emmanuel will be more than happy to host this meeting, this one and the one April 21st. And like I said, this is your time. Miss Whitney, she's Whitney Middlebrooks. She will show you what we have so far, and this will be about an hour and a half presentation for 30 minutes for questions, Q&A. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you so much for that. So we've already got checked in, so all of you have been checked in before you came in. All right, so we'll skip over that. Just want to go over our meeting norms, right? So we just want to make sure that we are respecting each other, speaking one at a time. Anything that's said in here, we want to make sure it's confidential. We don't go off and say, well, Ms. Johnson said such and such about this. We want to keep it in this room as much as possible. Also keeping our comments as brief as we can. We don't have a long time, but I do want you all to definitely be able to express yourself, your concerns, hopes, fears, dreams, whatever that is, be able to absolutely voice that tonight. We also do have some devices. No one asked for a device in this meeting, but if anybody did want to use a tablet to take a moment to actually look at the maps and actually interact with them, putting your address in and see what potential changes could be, we could definitely provide that to you. And everything that, in terms of your feedback, we definitely want the questions and the comments, but we need you to go into our dashboard, which is just an online website, and be able to submit it, okay? Is that clear of understanding like how this works? Also, I want to get through the presentation because by a show of hands, who is familiar with what this work is? Who's familiar with Foster Diverse Schools, seeing the grant? Okay. Who has actually taken time to, well, first, who participated in a listening session last year? A few people? Okay. Who has taken time, those people that participated, to actually go online and see the new proposed maps? Okay. So, there's a lot of people in here that are not familiar with what this is, so I want to make sure that I have ample time to explain that. I don't want to think you all know, right? So if you could just hold your questions until the end of it so I can get through that everybody's on the same page and understanding what this is, okay? So for today, we're going to go over the project. We're going to talk about what we did in phase 2. We're also going to discuss the first draft of maps, okay? And we're also gonna play a video to show you how to actually go into the dashboard, how to use it, and how to submit your feedback. And also, again, we'll take questions at the end. So just very briefly, Dr. McMillan is not here tonight. I think she may be a little late. Dr. Effie McMillan is actually one of the co-project leaders for Foster and Diverse Schools, along with Frank Patano. And we have Haman, who's also over the business application and data systems with the district. And I am Whitney Middlebrooks, and I'm the project director for Foster and Diverse Schools. So I wanted to just show a face of who we are. I know you've probably seen it in the news. You've probably seen the Facebook groups. Who knows? I know there's a lot of chatter about what this is, but I do want to put a face of who we are and what our roles are in this project. We've also wanted to be very transparent in this work. I am only here for this project, right? So I came to the district contracted just for this. What I have learned just going through the community, there's some hurt there. There's a little distrust. There's a little, we don't trust the district. We don't know what you all have going on. Perhaps things have happened decades ago that don't seem transparent. It's like we don't trust that you're actually listening to us, okay? And so what we have done for this work is to contract in professionals outside of the district to handle this work. This is not district work, so I just want to be very clear of that, because there's been a lot of, you already know what the maps are going to be. You don't really want to hear our feedback, but we've been very intentional about that. So we have been working with Northeastern University. They are in Boston, and they are a data group, and they've done all of our data analysis. They have all the feedback that we have received, they are going through it and actually reading it, considering what you are saying, and that has actually helped build these first drafts of maps, okay? And we've also worked with Urban Strategies. The young lady that checked you in, she's with Urban Strategies. They also helped us go around the community, listening, canvassing, knocking on doors, passing out flyers, because our goal is to say, if this is passed, right, we don't want people to say, I did not know the district was going to do this. So we've tried every effort to reach people, at least to say, do you know this is going on? Do you know this could potentially happen? So we have been very intentional in that work of going in a community. We have missed some groups, right? We wanted to target our Hispanic families for sure, because they make up over 30% of our district, and we're not hearing from them. Less than 10% that we heard. So we're working now to say, okay, how can we reach them? Can we do some more marketing and advertising with their specific media groups to reach them? We have not heard as much from our African American families. And so that's why we want to be intentional as well of coming to where you are, so that there's not just a loud voice on one side and we're not hearing it in other areas. Okay, that makes sense? All right. So how did we get here? So the district has not updated the residential school boundaries in over 30 years. 30 years is a long time, right? When you think, actually about 34 years. So 30 years, the district has not updated the residential school boundaries. What does that mean? So when new schools have come, right, the district has taken a look at neighborhoods and pockets, saying, okay, we'll update this neighborhood, they'll be zoned to this school, but no one has looked at it in a comprehensive level to say, why haven't we looked at this in over 30 years, right? And so we have identified that there are some transportation issues. There's some transportation inefficiencies. We have students that are passing 3 and 4 schools to get to their residential school. And why is that? Because nobody's looked at it in over 30 years, right? And so we also have identified that the district is socioeconomically segregated. And we'll get into what that means and how we break down socioeconomic status, but that is what we've identified. And so our goal is to make our district more efficient in transportation, reduce some of those travel times, and also improve that diversity. We do understand we can't make it 100% diverse, as we're not busing kids. So I just want to point that out. We're not busing students from the west to the east or vice versa, because that's actually going to increase transportation drive time. So we want to take a look at it and say, how can we make some shifts at least to update these boundaries and make them more efficient for parents, transportation, and students as it relates to what school they go to. And one thing I want to point out too is that this is a planning grant, okay? Dr. McMillan has just arrived, and so when her and Frank Patano applied for this grant, they were very intentional about doing a planning grant, not an implementation, because we understand 30 years is a long time. You can't just say, okay, we're just going to implement it and that's it. So planning was very also strategic, because we wanted to get feedback from the community, get your thoughts, concerns, and so this is a stakeholder-driven project, okay? And planning is just planning itself. So just go to here. So when we think about where we are in a planning grant, we are just going to present, we now have maps, and we are going to be showing you these draft maps up until July. We'll take some time off in May to get your feedback, okay? So that's our timeline. So we'll go through April. You have time to go in, look at them, give your feedback. We'll take time off in May. We'll come back in the summer to say, hey, these are the updates that we have made. Please go back and look at it and give your feedback accordingly. So our grant ends in September, so our goal is to have feedback, a vote from Board of Education by August. Does that make sense? So Board of Education will say yes or no. If they say yes, we would then apply for implementation grant. We'll go through that process, and any changes will still be phased in. It wouldn't be something very immediately. Children would be uprooted. That's not our goal. But if they say no, we will have all this information that will be transparent to the community to look at, and it would be researched and to show this is what we propose in 2025. Does that make sense? Okay. So I want to go back briefly. I mentioned socioeconomic status. So when we look at socioeconomic status, we are looking at these 5 factors. And these 5 factors include median family income, adult education in the home, single parent homes, on the percentage of homeowners and families that speak another language than English. So with this work, we are not considering race, okay? The question always comes up, well, why not race? But when you do look at those factors, it can maybe show the differences of what the racial aspect as well. But for our grant, we are not focused on race. We are specifically looking at these 5 factors when we say that the district is not socioeconomically diverse. So one of the big things is, why does this matter? Not only has it been over 30 years, the city of Winston-Salem itself has grown tremendously over 30 years. There's new neighborhoods, population, new roads, new families, all that stuff. And so our goal is to, one, we need to look at it because we're not in line with what a good district standard should be of looking at our residential school boundaries at least every 3 to 5 years. And so also bringing students from different backgrounds. We have a lot of schools that are overcrowded, and we have schools that are incredibly underenrolled. And so it's not balanced in that capacity. So we need to look at that to say, okay, and updating residential school boundaries can also help fix that. And we also want to look at, again, saving time and money on our transportation, along with keeping students together. The number 5 point was something that was not really considered initially when we put this planning grant together, but we heard that from community, is that we want to keep our students together, our students from elementary, middle to high school. So we added that in of making sure that we can also look at that. So it doesn't break up some of that social group. We know children do like to stay with their friends and kind of have that community as they grow from elementary, middle to high school. But we understand that, of course, maps cannot change everything, right? We also need different rules and ideas and different policy to also support this work. And so this is why you all are here today, to give us some more insight, something that we didn't consider, and other things that we can also consider possibly presenting to Board of Education as we have our, present the final map to Board of Education. So as I mentioned before, this is just residential school boundaries. So that just means simply a student is assigned a school based on where they live. So if you live in this house, you are zoned to a school based on where you live. And so we are not updating choice or magnet. So some families do take advantage of the choice program, which is if they don't want their student to go to a certain school, or they have a different program at a school they want their child to go to, they would apply for choice and be able to go to that school accordingly, okay? Does that make sense of how choice works? So we're not looking at choice. Choice will not change, or magnet will not change. This is just residential school boundaries. And one thing to really, as I mentioned before, is this is not an immediate change, right? So we're not gonna uproot students from schools. It will be a phased-in process. And if it is approved, if approved in a perfect world, as early as 26-27 school year. And that's when I say if we got everything, our ducks in a row, and that's just letting you prepare. We want parents to know that it could potentially be 26-27, but this is something that would be, if approved, you all would know in advance. You would have time to know this, notice, emails, information would go out for you in your home and your child to prepare for that. So as I mentioned, a few hands went up that participated in our listening sessions last year. So we had over 108 listening sessions. We went across the district to hear voices. We spoke to parents, students, and staff, and community members. We had indirect and direct contact of engagement with almost 12,000 people. So I feel like that was some hard work. Dr. If you want to come up, I know that some of the work is that, have we ever had a sample like that with previous work that you have been a part of? So this would be, as I mentioned before, we're very transparent about this is what we did, this is who we heard from, and we were also intentional about who are we not hearing from. So we could actually track to say we're hearing a great amount of response from this side, but we're not hearing from our inner city families. We're not hearing from families in the north or the south. So we were intentional about, if we didn't hear from you, we tried to have a session in that area, like a location that could be central to that area. And again, meeting people where they are, going to events, going to different community festivals that may not even be relevant to this, but if we were out there saying, did you know, here's a flyer, please look at this, take our survey, and making sure that families and community are at least informed and aware of what could potentially be going on in the community with the district or changes. So one thing for sure is that this is not a vote. So if you've been thinking, I got to get my vote in, it's not a vote. We're literally just taking your feedback. We want you to give your opinion, your thoughts. If you don't like it, tell us that. This is an ongoing process. So as I mentioned before, we're going to share these maps up until the end of April. We will take time off in May to make updates. We'll come back to you in June and say, hey, we made these updates. Come back and look to see what, because again, all this is based on feedback, to see if something did change based on your address. And so the only group that'll probably be making a vote is our Board of Education, and that's going to be in August. So they will have a final vote and a final say in August of a comprehensive map that they will review and give their vote accordingly if they decide to move forward with this. You want to speak?
Good evening, everyone. I do apologize for being late. I was with another parent group before coming to this meeting, and I was advised by one of our board members who stepped in shortly and then left out to say, if you do not speed, because I'm known to do that. So I made it here safely. I'm excited to be here. I'm Dr. Effie McMillan. I'm the Chief Equity Officer. I do co-lead this project with Frank Pantano, who is the Executive Director for Choice and Magnet. He does pretty much all of our student assignment work. So I'm excited to be in front of you. As Whitney has been talking about, this is definitely a planning process. And so with the goals that we set out with initially to reduce travel time, so some things that we were hearing from families was they were passing multiple schools to get to the school that their child was actually assigned to. So those were some things we heard. We knew and had been raised by many community members about the lack of diversity across schools, definitely number of schools that have high concentration of poverty versus schools that have high concentrations of wealth. So when we pursued this grant, we wanted to look at those primary factors. As the first draft maps came out and we started hearing feedback, some of the things that showed up in the maps were really counter to improving distance, school to home to school distance. So we made some early changes, really just because of travel time. So we didn't want travel time to increase like double what somebody was going now. On average, children travel about 2.5 to 3 miles away from their home to their school. Well, with some of the early drafts, we were seeing actual increases of maybe 7 to 8 miles. And we didn't want to put that on families or students to have long bus rides. So there were some sections that we had to look at across the region. So in the southwest area is where we saw some drastic increases in distances that was affecting Clemens Middle, West Forsyth area. It just added a lot of time to their driving distance. Some of that reassignment was beneficial because Parkland is extremely overcrowded, Parkland High School. We've had students who have lifted that up. We met with students today. They talked about how crowded their school is. We've had parents to say how crowded their school is. Plus, Parkland is also a magnet school. They have an international baccalaureate magnet focus, which is a strong program that when students participate and graduate through that pathway, leave high school with college credits, which we know reduces financial burdens for families and all of that. Well, due to how crowded the school is, just based on how the boundaries are currently drawn and have not shifted in a long time, it's led to overcrowding, but it also does not allow space for children or families who may be interested in those programs to actually apply for that magnet program. So actually shrinking their boundary a little bit will help to relieve overcrowding, but also can allow for space for students to apply to be a part of that magnet program. Same is true for Reynolds with their magnet program. I will say that for Parkland, we just received like a $12 million grant to pour into Parkland to really strengthen the program that we have there. So we know redrawing boundaries doesn't fix all things. So there's other ways we have to make investments to improve schools and access that students have to great programs and great opportunities. There were a couple of neighborhoods, which is when you're talking to friends, family, colleagues, or anyone who, particularly if they have children in the school system currently, or they have very small ones that have not entered kindergarten yet. There were some neighborhoods, like in the Kernersville area, where it was literally a cul-de-sac, and so if I lived in this house, I was going one place. If I was living in this house, I'd be going somewhere else. So some of those adjustments have been made. I won't talk through all of them, but those are some things that came up early on that we wanted to address, and we'll continue to look at those things. So I'm going to talk very briefly about where we are right now. I know Whitney spoke to you about all of the feedback we got through those 108 listening sessions and the surveys. Some of that information does not help to inform how a map is drawn. So all the other information has been, our strategic planning team has access to it. We've been processing it too to say what we can do around that data. But the things that we could use to help redraw boundaries led to 3 kind of early maps that we're asking the whole community to weigh in on. Map A only optimized for socioeconomic diversity. And one of the things that when we went in, it was kind of hard to tell what the socioeconomic diversity was of every school, just for the type of data that we actually have. I'm gonna go back to that for just a second. And so based on our definition that we gave, we wanted to just optimize for diversity. We had several schools and segments of our community that talked about wanting their child to attend a socioeconomically diverse school, and that was a real top priority for them. So when we asked them to rank certain things, this was one of the things that came top of mind for them. With Map A, when you have a chance to look at it, does the best that we can do with increasing diversity across schools. That's why it gets 5 stars. But by optimizing for diversity solely, or that being the biggest priority in the map configuration, it does cause longer travel times for families. And also the piece that Whitney was speaking about, where we did not think about or include, is families mentioning that they wanted their children to stay together from elementary to middle and from middle to high school. So they had like a true feeder pattern. Right now we have about 40 splits of where if I go to this school, some kids go this way, some kids go this way, some may go this way. Map A actually makes that a lot worse. It changes it to about 107 times that children would be split apart from their peer groups, going in different directions from one level to the next. So that would be the trade-off. If our community says they really like what Map A would do, then it would cause longer travel times. It would cause more splits from friends. Map B really tried to optimize for travel, school to home distance more. So you'll see that that map does really well, keeping kids close to where they live and families closer to where they live and not having to drive so far. It also improves how many times children are split apart. So it actually reduces the number of feeder pattern splits. And then C tries to do everything, all of it, and putting some different weights on all of it. So we can see with Map C, based on trying to do everything, it does not really improve socioeconomic diversity across schools. It does well with home to school distance. It does well with the school feeder patterns, about the same as Map B, but the diversity is not that strong. This gives you a little bit more context. With any changes that happen, only about 20% of students will potentially be impacted. Map A gets us the best with diversity, close to 20% increases. but it increases that travel time. Even though 0.15 doesn't sound like a lot, that's on average. So some families may really have a lot larger travel distance than some others. Some it may reduce, but a lot will have more, affecting about 24 students across the district. MAP B, that really maximize for travel, increases diversity about 9% across schools. And that doesn't mean every single school, but we can improve diversity at schools about 9%. So not as great as what MAP A does. Travel time definitely decreases almost a mile, about 0.8 of a mile on average, affecting about 19% of students. And then MAP C, the least amount of diversity change in schools, close to a mile reduction in travel time, and would affect about 15% of students. So I just wanted to give you a little context behind the maps and what they're telling us based on the different information we learned and how we could apply it to actually creating maps that would reshape everything across the entire county. So I just want to kind of reiterate that it's been 30 years, so because this grant was actually available, we decided to look comprehensively at the district versus when a new school is built, they always have to carve out or create new lines for that school. So for example, when Louisville Middle was built, when it was built, it didn't have an attendance zone. So an attendance zone had to be created. So they had to redraw lines, which meant it pulled kids from different schools to go to Louisville Middle. This will be the first time in 30 years that we have tried to do a wide sweep across the entire county to know where we can really make change, and then to begin thinking about, we're looking for lots of feedback to really come back to the board with a great proposal, and then hearing from families on what they would recommend even for implementation. How might we phase this in that creates the least amount of disruption, creates the least amount of harm to families, that can be rolled out over a period of time that will help us to make some progress for the future. So just by show of hands, how many people in here have even gone and looked at has anybody in here? Nobody has looked at it. Okay. Okay. So Whitney is going to actually show you, we have a short video just to show you what our dashboard looks like, how you can go and look at it and and see all the information, and then also to be able to provide feedback. Once you see that, then we're going to open it up for questions. Where do you want me to send it? But where am I sending it to?
So we're having some technical difficulties, but I think he's going to get the link and he's going to play it. But the purpose of this is important because everybody doesn't know what this looks like. So we want you to be able to have some confidence when you click on the link to say, what am I even looking at? What does this map mean? What is all these lines and all these different changes? So this video is important to actually look at so that it makes it all make sense so that you can actually interact. You can toggle back and forth. You want me to text it? You sure? So yes, but I guess as we wait, we want to take a, if we can get the lights to be turned down so they can see the video better. Thank you. Okay. Well, that was extreme. No more videos. No more slides. Hmm.
Welcome. In this video, I'll give a short introduction and walkthrough to this website. To view this website in Spanish, you can click here. As you may have heard, Winston Salem Forsyth County Schools is exploring updates to its residential school boundaries. These boundaries say which schools each student will attend by default. Last year, we reached out to the community to hear your thoughts and feelings about your schools and the possibility of change. You can learn more about what we heard by exploring the community feedback report here. After hearing and studying all your feedback, we now have first draft maps to show to the community. This website here is a place for you to learn more about the new map proposals and to give your feedback. These proposals are not final. We need to hear what you think so we can improve them before recommending anything to the school board. Let's walk through this website together. The first section gives an overview of the project and its goals. Please give it a read. One thing I will highlight: any changes to school boundary maps will happen in the 2026-2027 school year at the earliest. Students will not be forced to leave the schools that they are currently attending. For example, if a student is in elementary school, they won't be asked to change schools until they are moving on to middle school. In the next section, you can see a very quick summary of the 3 different map proposals. Hover or click on the information icons, or click on the See Details to learn more. In the next section, you can dive deep into the details about each map. There's a lot here, so feel free to spend as much or as little time as you want to explore. Click to expand. First, you see the maps. You can toggle between the 3 map proposals, as well as the current boundaries as they are today. You can see the boundaries for elementary, middle, and high schools. To more easily compare a proposal to the current boundaries, you can toggle the current boundaries on and off. You can also toggle to see concentrations of lower socioeconomic status, or SES. A key goal of this project is improving socioeconomic diversity in schools to reduce concentrations of poverty. This is an important part of giving all schools and students the same opportunities to perform well. Next, you can see how each school changes in each proposal. How much does the percentage of lower socioeconomic status students change in each school? How much do average travel times change for students assigned to each school? And finally, where do students go as they move from one school to the next? In the next section, you can enter an address to see how each proposal affects that residence. You can see how your feeder patterns change or don't change, and how the diversity and distance might be different in each proposal. In the last section, the most important section, we need to hear from you. Remember, these proposals are not final. We need to hear your feedback so we can make them better before recommending anything to the school board. In part 1, let us know how you're connected to the school district, and let us know which map you prefer. Tell us what you like or don't like about it. This is not a vote. We will be taking all the feedback into consideration together to make improved maps. In part 2, you can give us some information to help the district plan for any new changes. And in part 3, you can upvote different issues that we have heard from the community. What are some ideas you'd like us to recommend to the school board alongside new maps? Finally, feel free to write in anything else you'd like to share or anything that we missed. And please, please, make sure to hit the submit button so we get your responses. If you would like more help working through these proposals or would like to talk about them with other community members, please register to attend a community feedback session. You can also contact us or click these links to learn more about the project and how we went about making these maps. Thank you. Welcome. In this video,
Right, so we've taken time to go over the demo and look at the map. So we're going to open it up for questions. So any concerns, comments, you can, and actually we do have 2 mics here. So if if you're able to walk up so everybody can hear you.
Or if you can talk extremely loud.
Or if you can.
Either way.
You said race is not a factor. So how does this mapping, what's your hypothesis on how this is going to affect African American schools, African American neighborhoods, and those places that have a concentration of poverty?
Yeah, so that's what we've been trying to explore through this planning process. Supreme Court ruling back probably in the 90s says we can't use race to make any student assignment decisions. So that was the reason why race was not a factor in the decision in it. So we could look at socioeconomic diversity, which is why we went with some national definitions to really look at different factors within socioeconomics beyond just how much a family earns and brings into their house, to capture the difference across each of our schools. Where we have challenge and why we are trying to reach across the community is that, I'll give a good example, where Cook, Brunson, Kimberly Park, Forest Park, all within that area, you have 4 or 5 schools that are all within such close proximity to each other. And you have a very dense area, and it's all high concentration of poverty. And it's splitting that group into the schools. And so one of the things we're grappling with and questions that have come up to us from some community members, some schools, is like, we don't see a lot of change here. And the only way we would be able to really make change is to go back to busing. And we don't want to go back to busing because that also adds a burden to families. We've heard from some members within that community or community organizations that may work directly with families in that area, and some families that have shown up to some of our meetings that have talked about not wanting to be bused. We were just on a call, was it last week, with a neighborhood organizing group, and one of the gentlemen on the call said, I was bused from, he told us where he was bused from all the way out to West. And so we know that still has a lasting legacy within this community of that happening. And he said it was not the most memorable experience for him to be bused that far. So we're not proposing for busing to happen, for students to go far distances away from home that might cause them not to be, particularly if I'm experiencing some financial challenge, to be able to get to my child quickly or be able to engage in the school. So that's a really great question, because those are some of the things we're grappling with, and we want to hear from the communities to see what are the thoughts, what are the needs, and knowing that just shifting boundaries doesn't fix all things or solve all problems, and that we have to invest in other resources and programs too. So
that is the exact thing that I was referencing. So how do you, without busing, and I'm assuming what I'm hearing, the goal is to lessen places like that with concentrated poverty, and those who don't have concentrated poverty, to kind of spread it out amongst all of the schools and kind of balance it out between the schools. But how do you do that in a concentrated area like that with all of those schools without busing? And I was bused too. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I was bused from Boston out to Sherwood Park to some folk who didn't want me there. But that's going to be a hard nut to crack if your goal is to balance out the socioeconomic diversity throughout all of the schools.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So for those schools that I just mentioned, it's hard for us to make any type of change in that area just because of how just the county, the segregation plays out in the county. So it's hard to make that change. So some of the things that we have heard or considerations for us for the future might be types of programming that is at schools that may not be impacted really around this mapping process, but what programs might be really sought after by families in that community within that area, what would those be, and how do we go after funding to bring those types of magnet programs or things within those schools? Magnet programs is really kind of the only other option that we have in a school system that allows you to enroll students in a school using race. That magnet programs is the only kind of other mechanism that would be done for that. So this is why we are trying to engage and hear these types of questions to help us to think through all of this. Mm-hmm. And then I know we also had some other questions too, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're lessening centralized poverty in other schools, but you're leaving these schools in poverty.
Yep. Exactly.
So as
exactly.
Black schools are left out, those that are in that concentrated poverty area,
Yep.
there has to be some type of plan for that, because if not, it's not going to be good.
Yeah. And that is exactly what we're grappling with as a project team. You're saying exactly what we are grappling with and the questions that we're asking. Because even when we talk to like staff at the schools that I mentioned, they want more diversity at their schools. They also talk about the need for resources, and it's a hard conversation. This is a really difficult task, which is another reason why we went after the 2-year planning grant, because some of the way that it is has been by design. Okay, I just be honest. And I speak that in our meetings. It's by design, and how do you break through that design for different and better? To your point, not doing anything is not okay with me. But I don't have all the answers. Like, our project team doesn't have all the answers, and we need community to help us to solve a really big challenge and issue that we have that is. So, yes, the questions you raise are the very ones that keep me up at night, that we have school leaders asking about too, that we have families asking about too, and we want to hear what's important. And trying to balance all of that is a big issue that we're dealing with. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm looking at the map for A, which has the best chance of increasing the SES or lowering the SES. So I'm looking at Vienna Elementary School, and it says it's going to lower the SES in the proposal by 0.99%. Most of them say they're going to lower it. So my question is, what is that percentage now that you're only lowering it 90? Some of them have, like the Louisville school that you mentioned, it has 0% of being lowered. So what is the percentage? So we'll have a clear understanding of the SES population in those particular schools.
Are our partners on the call? They have all the statistics right behind it at their fingertips of the schools. Okay. Can we go and pull that up? Yeah. Can you pull up where it shows the difference, where it shows the change in the
low-income students?
And so let me speak a little bit about that. Whitney's trying to pull it up. I know we have to do it based on addresses. What has been another challenge for us in this process is data that is available. So to look at the blocks, this is where we have to have technical assistance. I feel like I'm pretty smart, but some engineering and all of that is not my forte. So I have to lean on experts for that. But when we looked at the whole county, you know how we do census and you have census blocks and all of that. So basically we had to use the data that's publicly available around those different blocks across the entire county, using the factors that we saw that comes up in that readily available data. One of the challenges that we have is, and particularly after COVID hit, there was a time, because I've been in education almost 30 years now, so a lot has changed. There was a time when families had to fill out a lunch application form, breakfast, lunch, a meal application form to qualify for free or reduced lunch, which would give us very clear data on the economic status of the students that make up the school. We don't have that, and we can't drill down to the individual level with that anymore. So what has happened is, this adds to some of the complexity. What has happened is that schools, based on a certain radius from within that school, might be deemed community, have the status is CEP, we call it community eligibility provisions, which means within this certain radius, whatever that has been defined to be, says that there's great need for that area. So you may have a lot of families that are in need of supplemental supports from SNAP benefits or Medicaid or any number of additional resources. So for schools that are identified as community eligible provision, we no longer have families to fill out any type of meal application. Every child in that school gets free meals, breakfast, lunch, and if they have a snack program, gets those snacks. So that has added to some of the challenge that we just don't have. And plus it would be private, it's a confidentiality thing, so we couldn't get it released anyway if they filled it out. So we've had to rely on those blocks of publicly available data to say, if every student within this area goes to the school, this is what the diversity would look like. Now, what we do know that adds complexity to this is that every student who may live in that block or that area doesn't always go to the school they are assigned. But by state law, we are required to assign every child to a school. So that was a great question, because hopefully it helps you to see some of the other complexity that we have in it and trying to just figure out all pieces. Mm-hmm. So, but in order to know the percentage that you want to lower it, you have to know what percentage you charge. Yeah. Yep. Are you looking? Oh, I don't know if you can see this up here or not.
So he wanted me to repeat it, not that I feel I need to, but I will, because I'm being obedient. In order to know the percentage you want to lower, you have to know what you're taking, the total number that you have in order to take that percentage. And that's the percentage, that's the number that I'm looking for. Like if it's 100% SEC and you want to lower it by 62%. Or is that, you're saying everything's 100 and you're lowering it?
She was looking at Vienna. So we're trying to find Vienna.
So all of that is available on the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website, ncdpi.org, ncdpi.org. You can go on there, you can find Forsyth County, you can drill down school by school. There is a percentage of what they call a percentage of low income or poverty. The language changes sometimes year to year. The way they calculate it changes sometimes year to year. So there is a baseline there, that you can see. and it's readily available, and you can look at it over a period of more than 1 year on the Department of Public Instruction website. So the school that you're mentioning, you mentioned Vienna, right? Right, that's right. So they're roughly around 20%, 25 maybe on the top end. I've got some numbers here. They're not, right up to this year, but it's right there for people to see. And, the hyper socioeconomic segregated schools are well known in this county. Okay, so on the spectrums on each end, where you've got 90%, 100% low-income students concentrated in schools, and on the other end of the spectrum, you got 30% and below, right? So all the Title I schools have to be 75% or above.
50.
That's just minimum.
50 is the.
Well, that's the automatic Title I.
Yeah,
You
50%.
you must fund 75 and above. You do not have to fund below 75. That's a choice the district makes.
So we look at 50% for that. So I just pulled up the map. I was pulling it up. I was hoping we could see it up here just so you could see it, because each map, I think that's important for everyone to know, each map represents something different, right? And so you can look at, on average, what changes would be, and then you can actually see it when you put your actual physical address in there. So like when I look at Vienna, if I'm looking at, which one am I looking at? Okay, I'm looking at map B for Vienna. And what it tells me is that whether there's going to be no change in diversity, if it's going to increase in lower socioeconomic status. So right now, they're at 0.74, so about 74% of their students are considered socioeconomically diverse. Hopefully I'm not misspeaking. With the proposed map under A, if there are any changes with, map B, I apologize. With map B, with changes, it would actually increase in lower socioeconomic status, which means students who are identified based on those 5 factors to be in lower socioeconomic status would increase by about 0.23. So we're starting at a base of 0.74 and going up to 0.23. I think the question that you have helps us to think about which these conversations are helpful, of how clear the information is that we have online that people can actually go and see, and to be able to navigate it easily and well. So that's really great feedback for us. It's also, we've heard that also come up for when the updated kind of maps come out, us being able to show that information very clearly so that people are not trying to figure it out on their own. So that is very helpful. And then you may see something different for map A and then map C in terms of change. So like, for example, let me go to like Ashley or somewhere. Okay. Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. Oh, is that bottom? Okay. Oh, cool. Sorry, go ahead, you move it for me. Okay, so I think to the pastor, please forgive me for not remembering your last, Miller, right? Miller, yes. Pastor Miller brought up, like when I look at map, which map is this one? Map A. They have high percent of lower socioeconomic status students, about 100%, very, very high. Even with trying to just, map A, with just trying to optimize for diversity, they don't really see change. And every way that we tried to look at it meant long bus rides or busing, far travel for families. So they don't see it in map A. Yeah, or the other maps. And that's again due to the high density of concentrated poverty in one area with about 4 schools all sharing the same students. So that really creates a challenge for us. That creates a real challenge for us to make significant change using a map redesign to impact the students without busing. So we have to look at other things like maybe magnet programs or something to bring to the communities to help to increase diversity if, and I'm gonna say if that is a real priority for their community, which is what the types of things we want to hear. We don't want to force just a change around diversity if that's not what is big priority for the community. It might be other things. And so what I'll say is like one community group that we were talking to, because the schools that I mentioned are primarily Hispanic and Black students. Talking to some Hispanic community members, you know, their concern was proximity. They was worried about that, but they were also, for their schools, we're talking about where the children were going right now might have had bilingual staff there, and if they change, and there's not bilingual staff. So, like, those are all the things we also want to hear through this process, because if diversity for the community that is attending already assigned to the schools that we've mentioned that won't see change, if that's not important, but there's other things that are really, really important, like those are things we need to know as we go through this process so that we're not making decisions that could actually cause harm or lead to harm down the road. So I see this hand, and then there's a hand back here. Oh, I'm sorry, and look this way. Who was first? Okay, and then was she second, or? Okay, and then we'll come back here. Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you guys for hosting this session this evening.
Thank you for coming again. This is like your third one, right?
You couldn't get rid of me, sweetheart, if you tried. Just to give some context, when the current map system that we're looking at right now, what it is today, what is affecting our students today, those changes were made back when I was in high school. Yes, I am today's years old. And what those changes did specifically for my family is that my younger sister, we're 5 years apart, I'm the elder of the two of us. Naturally, you would presume that when the older sibling is going to one school, the younger sibling is going to follow. It just makes sense, at least to me. That was not the case up until high school. My younger sibling and I, we went to both elementary, same middle, but then high school, we became split because the district lines that we have today were changed. And for so many families looking at this process, that's not something that they want to do. Younger siblings look up to their older siblings and like, oh, when I get to middle school, I'm gonna go here. Or when I get to high school, I'm gonna go here. That, you know, it's a sense of pride. And then two, for families who have multiple children, if your student is going one place for elementary and one place for middle, and then your eldest, if you have 3 students in your family, is going to high school, and all of those schools are on a B, C as far as your drive time, you know it's going to take you about 20 minutes to get all your kids to school and to get you to work and throughout the rest of your day. But when those maps are changed and your commute goes from East Winston to West Forsyth High School, then that is a 45-minute going and a 45-minute back. And that's only if there is no traffic and no accidents on Interstate 40. But yes, like the lovely lady that's in front of me, you do not want to have to bus students. Mm-hmm. Students, yes, we're precious cargo, But that precious cargo should not have to be shipped to a school that's 20, 30, or 45 minutes away from their home, away from their friends, away from their community, and forced to learn in some of the most adverse situations that I am not about to waste this company's time talking about my own personal experience like that. But flipping that same coin for me, when I look at the current maps and seeing how many physical elementary schools the district has, physical middle schools the district has, and high schools that the district has, that, to me, math isn't mathing. We have far more elementary than we do middle, and we even have less high school. When I was in high school, I think we had 4. Now we have about, what, 8 or 9? Where are these students who are currently in elementary school going to go when they get ready to go to middle school and high school? We talk about not wanting to have overcrowding, but if the infrastructure is not there to support that, we can change these maps all we want to, but we're going to be back at square one. I do not want my youngest student, who is in 2nd grade right now, to have to be dealing with this issue years from now, that we have to go back to square one. So factors that we need to do no matter what happens is we need to make sure above everything else that our students are the priority.
Thank you so much for that. And she's been to a few of our sessions, so I think it's great because she's getting to hear conversations across different rooms. So I just want to speak to a couple of things that you lifted up. One of the project goals around our maps are very inefficient for how they're serving families right now. And in some ways, we are busing kids more now than what they should be. And that's for a number of different reasons. And so trying to right-size that is important. Because our boundaries have not changed in so long, we do have schools that are overcrowded. I mentioned Parkland earlier. We have schools definitely that are under-enrolled. We have a little under 51,000 students. That has decreased over time. Some of the data that has been shared with us is we get projection numbers. So each of the maps work with whatever the boundary is to make sure that we don't overfill a school. So we have an understanding of how many students the school was built for, programs that are in there, so how many students could actually be assigned to the school, those capacity numbers. So we do need to update boundaries based on schools being overcrowded because of lack of change and then schools being under-enrolled. But that's not the only reason why those things may have led to that. We have not only just a decline in student body, so eventually we would have to do it anyway, but we also, when we get our projections about the number of students that will be coming into our school system, that number is pretty stagnant too. So we're not seeing like huge birth rates. Birth rates are low, so we have to take into account how many students we would be serving over the next several years. Right now, what we know is that our highest number of students are middle schoolers and high schoolers. So as they matriculate out of the system, out of our public schools, that will help some with the boundaries, but it won't alleviate all of the things. We have growth that is happening in multiple sectors of our county, and then we have a little bit lower enrollment in our elementary schools just across the board. So trying to figure out a big issue that hasn't been tackled in for a long time is why we're here and why we're trying to take our time to hear from everybody across the community. So I hope that adds a little bit of context on kind of where we are too with this work. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a very specific
specific situation. Another school that's very overcrowded that I didn't hear you mention outside of Parkland is Reagan. So that is the area that I live in. I had two daughters that went to Reagan for high school, and then I have a son who's a freshman in high school this year. We've lived in the same neighborhood for over 10 years. When it was time for my son to go to high school, they told us that Reagan wasn't his district. Now, Reagan is maybe 3-point-something miles from our house, and the school that they chose for him to go to is like 2 miles from our home. So it was very unsettling for us to know that 2 of our children were able to go to one school, but my son was not able to go to another school. I had a comment about the statement that you made that you guys typically can tell by the areas that students live around the school, if they get free lunch, if they get Medicaid, and about the type of school that they go to. My son doesn't receive any of those things, so now he's at a school where he went to middle school with all his friends, he went to elementary school with all his friends, now he's the only one in high school by himself. So there are situations like that that I don't think are fair, and I would like to be able to better understand those situations, because again, if both of his sisters went to Reagan and they're only, my baby girl and my son, my baby girl just graduated last year. Even with her just graduating from Reagan last year, we assumed that there would be sibling preference. So he would be able to still go to the school, and they said that there was not. They said that that school had over 2,000 kids on the waiting list to go to that school, and he wasn't eligible. And I didn't understand that.
And so I think yours is a unique one. So I would like to get your contact information, just so I can dig into that a little bit more, because we haven't redrawn boundaries for high school to reassign students. We still have our choice process, so some people apply, and a lot of children get into different schools because of choice. In our policy, sibling preference is still there. I do want to just make clear to everybody, we're going to go back here and then come up here, back up here, that one of the things we are looking at, and just what we've heard, some of the things we've heard, and then just even us talking with other districts who've gone through this process kind of fairly recently, of helping us to kind of navigate and figure out some things too, like what but some of the things that they struggle with, and helping us to process what we're hearing, is around grandfathering kids in. And so, for example, if you have a child in here now that's second grade, if there was a change for 26, 27, let's say there were a rising third grader, we want to still honor that because we've heard that was important. Now, how that would be done, and if we could afford transportation for everybody who would be grandfathered in, that is what we would have to figure out a cost analysis when we start planning for implementation, and make sure we communicate that well. But grandfathering is a part of current policy. Sibling preference is a part of current policy. So before you leave tonight, if you would please give me your contact information. I want to talk with my co-lead who does student assignment, so we can figure out and be able to talk with you to help understand what happened and all of that. So make sure I have your contact information.
We have a question in the back.
Yep. Okay. Question in the back.
It's really more of a food for thought
Okay.
than a question. Last year, I had the opportunity to go and work in Cook Elementary School for a few days. And when I walked into the school, and I spent basically half a day, I didn't see a white child. And I kept asking, were there any white children in the school? Everybody said, yeah, I didn't see any. So I came back a couple days later, and I asked the principal. She said there were 4 children that were white in the school. So I did some investigating, and I was a little bit disturbed about what I saw. Now, what I saw in the school were some teachers who were remarkably dedicated, doing a phenomenal job with the students. I've never seen more dedication on account of the staff. But the more and more I found about it, something came across that basically what came across was legalized segregation, because the parents chose for those children to come there because they wanted them to come to a community school. Now, you talk about the problems with busing. Yes, that's criminal. It really is. Because if I had a child that was going to be on the bus for an hour and a half a day, 45 minutes in one, or I could put my child, walk my child to school, or have them walk alone, that's exactly what I would choose too. But also, if I had a child that lived in a community that was really, really poor, and they all went to school with a bunch of children of a different race, and they grew up and said, they were talking about what their childhood was like, and they lived in a multiracial community, and they said, everybody that went to my school but 4 children was African American or a mixed race. That would be criminal too. We need to take these things into consideration, that we supposedly live in a culture that is multiracial. I have to admit, going in that school ripped my heart. We went in to take bicycles to a school that was given to the children, that every child that made a year and 1 month's worth of growth would get a free bicycle. We anticipated that we would be giving out 38. We gave out 76. Those children and those families were dedicated to education.
Yep.
They were doing the best that they could. But yet they're going to be back there in a situation that's going to doom them to failure because they're not going to be experienced. Suppose they don't have that staff and that principal in 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
What kind of a future are we offering those children? Please take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
I know you can't consider race, but you cannot ignore it either. I'm sorry. But
No,
I'm
you're
about to
fine.
go
I
here.
appreciate you lifting that up. It's hard for me to separate socioeconomic status and race. To me, they just go hand in hand. It's just really hard to do that. I appreciate exactly what you said, which is why even when I said earlier, like maps don't change everything, what are the other recommendations and things we need to do? You're right about Cook. The principal, Ms. Tribby, has done some phenomenal things at Cook. She has a phenomenal staff, and they have made market improvements at the school. I think when I first got here, Cook was the lowest performing school in the state. And even though it's not where we want it to be, when you go from 9% proficient to 46% of children proficient, you're almost at 50, that is remarkable gains in the school. And those are the types of things that we continue to focus on too, is about teacher recruitment, teacher retention, the type of professional learning that's provided. How do we provide resources to schools to serve children well? So all of the things you're lifting up, you're absolutely right. I'm going to come back to the question here of all the things that you're lifting up, and even to the point that you made. We can't have these conversations in a vacuum, is what I'm going to say. We cannot. So when I come in a space like this, you're saying all the things that so many of us are advocating for change and improvement. We also can't do it alone as a school system. So we need people like you to also be a voice through emails to the school board, coming and showing up at school board meetings to speak on these very issues that they have to make big decisions around. So we're doing everything within our ability to reach as many people, to hear what everybody has to say, and make sure our community's voice is showing up in the process. I know we can't solve all the issues through this one, but the other things that are important also have to be lifted up so that you have people working in the district right now that are fighting really hard to make really good changes, and we've made some real good improvements. We still just have a long ways to go. So I hear you. We still have a lot of work to do, Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I really appreciate what she said because I was thinking along those same lines. And for me, I mean, I hear all that about the zones and the not busing and so forth and so on, but what I'm not hearing is that children in our racially non-diverse schools, most of those schools are not performing on grade level. Most of them are low performing. And even when we celebrate that the children are moving, you're still in an F school. And so for me, it's like being back in 1965, 1970.
Yep.
Brown
Yep.
versus Board of Education. The fight that we had to integrate schools. And now here we are in 2025, and we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Except we're tiptoeing around it because we can't talk about race. Why can't we ever talk about race when race is the problem? And I don't see how we're going to achieve this without some busing. I just don't see it, simply because we have a black side of town. We just do. And most of the kids in the segregated schools in this school system, they live in the black side of town or the Hispanic side of town.
Right.
How are we going to do this without having, like you said, these difficult conversations and stop tiptoeing around it and really, for real, make it about educating all of the kids, no matter what they look like or where they live. And I'm tired of us celebrating failure. You're coming from down here, and so then when we get you to here, we're celebrating, but you're still not achieving. Not like you are on the other side of town. So I don't even understand why we're having this conversation. I remember at the time I worked at the public library, my son was 3 when the zoning took place. And I heard you say it was by design, and I always said that. It was by design. And we couldn't get our community to come out and hear what was happening, and by the time it was done, it was too late. Reverend Mendez, who was the pastor of this church at the time, and Carlton Everly, they were at school board meetings. They were trying to get the community to come because they understood what was happening. I worked in one of the branch libraries. Those same zone maps were posted. People were coming to look at them, but not people from our community. And by the time we started stepping up to see what was happening,
Right.
it was already done. And so now here we are in 2025 because of that. But what about the children?
Yep.
All of the children.
Yep.
Yes, I want to thank you for that comment. I want
You're
to
actually
add to
preaching
that.
to the choir.
Yep. I want to add that what you're saying is true, right? We are having the same conversation in 2025, right? And so it's a lot of
frustrating.
systematic things
frustrating.
that have been in place. Let's call the thing a thing. Things have happened, whether it's strategic, by plan, and have created even more segregation. We went in listening sessions and community uplifted that there was certain administration at the time that also supported that in a sense and created more of that. And then we deal with things such as white flight, when families were integrated in neighborhoods, black and white families, and when white families, and again, this is not special to Winston-Salem, this is not special to North Carolina, this is actually across the United States, so we saw this. And so your affluent white families did say, hey, I don't want to live here, they dispersed. In this case, with Winston-Salem, this district, is they moved to the west. So those are those systematic things that we're still fighting against. And so we have certain concentrations of poverty in certain areas. And so we are fighting a battle that a lot of community feels like, I hate to say we, but district almost created as well. And so now let's fight against what we actually did. And so these conversations are important. And so I feel you of the racious, we can uplift it. And I want to uplift too. We had a wonderful session this morning with over 130 kids. Yep. Across the district, and they came up, they wanted to really talk about their school. There was students in groups, so we have a Carver and we had North Forsyth, and so we're looking at some changes. They put their address in. Some of the North students said, I don't want to go to Carver. I said, why you don't want to go to Carver? Because that's a ghetto school. So this is important that reputation starts to perpetuate this. Parents perpetuate, this is a bad school. Oh, that's a good school. So I said, why do you think Carver's bad? Well, I just know this. I just know. So I brought a student over from Carver. I said, come over here and sit with us. And it actually happened to be a white student. And so her experience was absolutely different. She says, I'm the minority at Carver. And she said, I don't really have anybody I can relate to. In her classes, she's the only white student. And so they didn't even know that. They're like, oh. So what happens is the conversations are needed, and so they were able to talk that out. Like, why do you think that Parkland's a bad school? Parkland stood up, and those students were ready to defend. We have this IB program. We're doing great. Actually, our school's overcrowded. We have all these great things, but community, those grades, right? The state does that, A or F through F, right? And it continues to perpetuate, this is a bad school, this is a good school, but I encourage you all to go to the schools. As she mentioned about Cook, there's some great things going on. These teachers are wonderful, but it just takes us to say, hey, it's been 30 years and let's do something about it. And we do need community, and I would say specifically the African American community, along with our Hispanic families as well, because you all are a large voice, and you don't want to wait to the last minute to say, oh, you changed it? I didn't know. So we have to get in the room. You have to tell your family, tell your children, do you know that there's possibly going to be a change? Have you looked at it? And this is important that for us to get in the room to also speak about it and to be able to give feedback, because most times your feedback really isn't considered. It's just done. So we just wanted to be intentional about what does community want, what are your needs, and how can we, we know everybody can't get what they want. We understand that everybody won't get exactly what they want, but what can we do to make it as equitable as possible, to hear everyone's voice and consider what that may look like, so.
I don't know what time we end today. I want to be respectful of people's time. I'm sorry. What time did we say we were going to end? I want to be respectful of time. 8 o'clock? Okay.
Okay, real quick.
Okay,
real
yes,
quick.
ma'am.
Obviously, I don't have any skin in the game. My grandchildren are much older and they're not here.
Okay.
But I relate to the young lady over there who talked about Brown v. Board of Education. I did not have the opportunity for busing. I went to an all-black school. I went to Atkins High School, the original Atkins High School. The only one as far as I'm concerned. But my kids, not in this city, but in another city, went to magnet schools. We mentioned magnet schools earlier. If we can't bus, if we can't talk about race, we have to stay with SES. Talk more about magnets, what magnets can do. And if we can't bus the kids out, can you bring the programs to the school?
Yes.
So can you bring great programs, if they're not already there, to cook? Yes. Whether it's in vocational training, having a senior moment, welding.
Okay.
I have a relative who graduated from high school, but he went into welding. That man made more money than I did, okay? So these are things I think that you're talking about publicity, you're talking about Carver High School, and everybody thinks, oh, Carver's a ghetto high school. Bring some of those good programs into Carver, but then talk about it, educate it.
Yep.
And I think another part, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight, but we need to educate these children. That's not a ghetto school. Right. And then tell them why it's not a ghetto school. But the kids need to know, the parents need to know. There needs to be more parent participation, of course. But I see this as a multifaceted program.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate you uplifting that and recognizing that it's definitely multifaceted. So when you do have an opportunity and you talk to other members of the community, if you're saying, we don't want kids to be, but I'm just throwing it out there, but we need to bring good magnet programs. The other thing I would want to see or hear from our community is, what magnet programs would you want? What would you want in our communities? There was a dual immersion program at Ashley. It's not operating under that now. Would we want that? Would we want that as a magnet program? Would we want other focuses? There's lots of different options that are out there, but like Montessori, there's so many different options that we could leverage. Magnet funds, we applied for a grant. We got money to invest in Parkland, Flat Rock. I think Connaught Middle was the other one. Seemed like there was a fourth school that's escaping me right now. But barring that federal funding does not shift away from magnet programs, we can continue to apply for those grants and get programs established in other schools. But I feel like as a school district too, this is just Effie, this is just my opinion. I don't want to be the person to say that this is the magnet program that needs to be brought to this school, but that might not be what the community wants or feel like is needed for the students that would be enrolled there. So I think that kind of feedback is very critical to us as well around whether it informs this process, but it may inform so many other things. So thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to touch base on what she said that the student said about Carver. I actually went to Carver many moons ago, but if you're familiar with Winston Salem, when I went to Carver, I lived off of Oak Summit Road, across the street from Oak Summit Park. And if you know where that is, you know that North Forsyth is literally 3 minutes down the street. But I went to Carver. That was my school, that was district for me. And even 20 plus odd years ago, it was deemed to be the ghetto school, and that's where kids went during that time. But it was the exact opposite for me, because I lived on the other side of town from Carver, but that was the school for my district. I also think that in order for us to make these changes, to change those narratives about those schools, parents have to start showing up to meetings like this. When I looked around when I came in this evening, I see myself, I know that there are several other younger parents besides me at the church, but I see that I'm one of the only younger ones that are here this evening. So if we don't start showing up in these rooms to have these conversations, we're going to remain as the ghetto high school in the city, but we're far from that. I had a very high GPA when I went to high school, and so did my brother. So that narrative just bothers me a little bit, because that's not always true.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you lifting up, because Whitney and I both, normally it's more of us that are here. We've added so many additional sessions to try to reach the community that we know it doesn't work for everybody's schedule, so we're all trying to just spread ourselves as thin as we possibly can. But to your point, we also need help with countering the narratives too. Unfortunately, the state of North Carolina, like some other states, attach a letter grade to a school to dictate or to describe it. And say it's low performing or it's not low performing, when we know that there are so many great things happening in all of our schools that letter grade is not a true depiction of the school and what's happening at the school.
Isn't that based on one test as well?
It's based on the tests that are, so for high school, it's English 2, biology, math 1, and math 3. I think it's 4 tests that are taken. Well, 10th graders are typically taking English 2. So it's not even measuring what freshmen, juniors, and seniors are doing for English. Biology is typically 10th grade. So it's not even all the students in the school, it's whomever is taking those classes. In elementary, it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th ELA reading in their math assessment. 5th grade takes science, 8th grade takes science, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th take reading and math assessments. But they look at that one day of testing to paint the picture for the whole school. And that's problematic in so many different ways. The narratives of things that we hear people say in the community, we're always saying, no, that's not true. My child is 31 now. There's not a school here in this district I wouldn't put my child in. There's not one that I would not send them to. And so we do need work. We need a district-wide strategy, which I've said. We also need community, to your point, to also be a voice for the great things that are happening in schools. We know no school is perfect. I will never claim that any school is perfect. Things happen at schools because you're talking about lots of different personalities together and things like that. There's not a perfect place. But we have so much more good happening than sometimes what's projected that is bad that's happening at schools. And so we do need the community's help to help us change those narratives too. So I appreciate that for certain. Absolutely. Are there any other pressing questions
Or comments?
We definitely want to honor and value your time. I don't know if everybody in here has children or grandchildren. You may have cousins or nieces or nephews that are school-age children. You may know people in the community that, want to have children, or maybe they have very small ones, newborns, or they just have not reached school age. What I ask for you to do on our behalf is to talk to as many people as you know, as many connections as you have, to say, these are things the district is looking at and you need to get involved. You need to know what's happening. You need to hear the information. You need to weigh in so that your voice can be heard in the process. Because one of the things that we aim to do is when we make recommendations to the board, we want to be able to clearly say, this is what we heard, where we heard it from, and this is what has informed our decision. And we can't do that if we don't have your voices as a part of the process. So please, anybody you know, or even, I know it mainly impacts people who have children or who will have children, but what I have learned working in this district is that there are a lot of people that are really concerned about what happens in our public schools. They've grown up here, they've lived here, they've graduated from the schools here, and they want what's best for the children just the same way that we do. But we've got to have your help with making good decisions, and we need your support to really make the changes that so many people have been asking for. We just can't do it alone as a school system. So, and if you can get involved at schools, like you said at Cook, please do that, because at schools like Cook, also, they don't have strong PTAs. And you think about the schools that have very strong PTAs, how much money it brings into the school and how it offsets resource, like it helps to benefit or fill a gap for resources that the school district can't provide, because we may not get enough state funding or federal funding to do all of the things. We don't have that at Cook. Many of our schools like Cook have either small PTAs or no PTA at all. So if our students, and we have to be student-centered, is really important to you, find out ways you can get involved. Help them strengthen those PTAs. Help with mentorship and all of that stuff. All of those things are important if we want to create a village of support and make sure our children are successful. So with that, if there are no questions, thank you so much for coming out. And we'll hang around for a little bit. If you want to just have a conversation, please make sure I get your contact information. Please be safe from leaving from here to your journey to home or wherever you're headed to.
One more thing, we also will be here on April 21st, so let your family and friends and the other members, if you didn't make it tonight, please have them come on the 21st, same time.
Yep. And maybe other members of our team will also be able to be here so you can meet them and ask them questions too. Thank you again. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And I have to say to my Aggie sister in the back, Aggie pride, I couldn't say it in the middle of